coming today.
We don't.
So we can't swear now. If everybody could please stand up. Murphy's Law, we had asked the Columbia Club to avoid the 42-degree temperature, so good to know they have a sense of humor. So I'd like to welcome Kiwanis and our guests to our presentation today. Special thanks to those who are helping with today's program. Roger Cummings at reception. I will call up Mrs. Wendy Paddock for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please bow your heads. Mr. Tom Dunham will lead us in our invocation.
Please assume and have a good prayer. Heavenly Father, remind us that God judges a person by measuring the heart instead of the head. Let us not grow smug and self-righteous, make us realize we must extend helping hand to those who are children who are ill, lonely, hungry, and not bless us food.
Be seated. We appreciate all our members, especially those with Kiwanis anniversaries this week. Mr. Tom Grinsdale, 56 years with downtown Kiwanis. Mr. Jeff Moon, 14. Ted Mao, 33 years. Holy cow. Mr. Bill Murphy, 28 years. Rush Yelverton, 29. And I can't believe Rodney's been here longer than me. Rodney, 13 years. Please look on your table for listing of upcoming meetings of the Columbia Club. We're trying to do as many meetings in person now as we can. If anybody has any ideas for national speakers that would be better suited to Zoom, going into the fall, it really is Columbia Club as a preference. Please get back in the habit of coming downtown. But if we do have a really attractive speaker, then Zoom is still on the calendar. So as the Delta variant comes back, we'll continue to follow Marion County guidelines and Columbia Club guidelines. Next week is Kiwanis Connections. So please reach out to any members you haven't talked to in a while and invite them to come down for next Thursday. And then ahead of next Thursday's meeting, Ms. Wendy Paddock will be leading a new member initiation, Mr. Ethan. And we'll round up some of the members, maybe in the last week. Mr. Ron Allman, etc. Past presidents, please expect an invitation early next week to nominate recipients for the 2021 Career and Civic Awards to be presented on September 30th at the past President's Day. Our 2022 Foundation Grant deadline is September 1st. If any of our guests have organizations who they feel would fulfill the Kiwanis mission for up to a $2,500 donation, those grant applications are available from this code. This is a unique week of milestones for our club's legacy. Please consider making a gift to our legacy campaign to honor our past, present, and future. With the passing of Mr. Blythe, one of our seminal leaders this summer, if you'd like to make a donation in his name, we've had about a half a dozen people. So, August 17th in 1916, our club became the first Kiwanis club in Indiana, and 18th in the nation with a charter membership of 54 people. My grandfather joined in 61, the third generation legacy personally. August of 1974, more than 400 members made this the world's largest Kiwanis club. August 22nd, 86. Just proclaimed Kiwanis Club of Indianapolis Day. My mayor had that. I went through that announcement last week. Lamita and I, my wife and I, are hosting a barbecue. Guests included. It's Saturday from 1 to 3 at our home in Westfield. If you're free. My father-in-law has the #1 barbecue place, Hanksville Brisket, 34th and MLK. So Hank's my father-in-law, so please show up to his restaurant for me. It's pretty good courtesy there. Yeah, he'll laugh until he charges you. So, Ms. Jean Ann is going to give us a summary of her efforts with the backpack attack.
Good afternoon. My name is Jean Ann Kirby. I'm a Kiwanis member, past president, and foundation board member. Since we will be hearing from Dr. Aleesia Johnson soon, she is the Indianapolis Public Schools Superintendent. She'll be speaking in just a few moments. The club asked me to share with you some information regarding backpack attack, which you know serves the IPS chair and the mayor's charter schools. Since 1999, Indy Backpack Attack's mission has been to collect school supplies to provide children with the tools they need to succeed in school. Since the start of backpack attack, more than 6 million school supplies have been collected. Annually, backpack attack serves more than 30,000 students. We collect over 200 to 250,000 school supplies every single year. Some kids need backpacks, some kids need colored pencils. We collect it all. Approximately 87% of IPS students need some form of assistance when it comes to school supplies. The teachers often try to pay for these themselves, but this need is so very large. If a student needs some school supplies, a little or a lot, all I have to do is go to their school counselor, and they will be helped out with whatever they need. This program is a collaboration of approximately 140 sponsors, local businesses, organizations, and nonprofits throughout the Indianapolis metropolitan area. Donations are made by means of school supplies, hygiene products, undergarments for girls, community grants, and monetary donations. Many volunteer hours are spent collecting, sorting, and packing, as well as distributing all of these items over just a 6-week period. By mid-July, all those who participated bring their supplies to the IUPUI surplus warehouse, where hundreds of volunteers sort, count, and package up supplies in uniform boxes over just a 2-week period. Then they are distributed to IPS and again, the mayor-sponsored charter schools. I am pleased to say that my employer, Indiana Members Credit Union, is a major corporate sponsor of this initiative, and that all of our branches serve as collecting sites. Along with that, I'm also proud to say that Kiwanis has been very generous in collecting some school supplies each year. It is our hope that next year we will work together to spend a morning or an afternoon with our Kiwanis Club and our IUPUI Circle K Club, helping sort in the warehouse. It's just out on 16th Street. P.S. Thank you very much. So, and we are thinking of doing this as our community, one of our community projects that we sometimes do when we love a meeting. If you would like to learn more about this terrific program, you will find information at backpackattack.org. Thank you very much.
Ms. Jackie Clancy will introduce today's illustrious speaker, Dr. Aleesia Johnson, IPS Superintendent.
Good afternoon. I guess I was asked to introduce our speaker because, as you know, most of you know that I'm a retired assistant superintendent from IPS, having served 27 years as an administrator there. So, of course, I can appreciate the many challenges that our speaker has to face. Dr. Aleesia Johnson Dr. Aleesia Johnson has been an educator for 16 years. She was named superintendent for Indianapolis Public Schools in June 2019. and is the first African-American woman to serve in this capacity. In this role, Aleesia oversees the strategic direction and operations of the district in achieving its mission to empower and educate all students to think critically, creatively, and responsibly to embrace diversity and to pursue their dreams with purpose. Over the course of her career, Dr. Johnson has served in a number of roles, including Innovation Officer and Deputy Superintendent for Academics and IPS, as well as middle school teacher, teacher development coach, assistant school leader, and school leader. Dr. Johnson graduated from Agnes Scott College with a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology and African American Studies. She also holds a Master of Arts in Teaching degree from Oakland City University, a master's degree in social work from the University of Michigan, and a PhD of education in leadership from Oakland City University. She and her husband are the proud parents of 4 children. I am honored and happy to introduce to you Dr. Aleesia Johnson, Superintendent for Indianapolis Public Schools.
Thank you so much for that fantastic introduction. I'm so pleased to get to be in person with a group of folks today and see some familiar faces in the room. I'm very thankful. Ahmed Young, who serves on the team as our General Counsel and Chief External Affairs, is here. A team member who I believe serves on our Unified Student Supports team is here. And then I think that's Alan in the back, who serves on Superintendent's Advisory Council. So it's really great to be in the room with some familiar faces. So I thought what I'd do today is really just to share a little bit about where we've been in this past year, which has been a year like none of us could have ever imagined, and where we are going and sort of where we are now. And then I think there'll be time, I believe, for questions potentially. So let's see if I can click successfully. Here we go. So where we've been, I was trying to think of like what graphic would best represent what the last 18 months has been, and particularly the last school year. And a roller coaster is just about the best I could come up with, because that has truly been what, if you were a parent of a student in this past year, you're an educator yourself, or anything connected to schools, you know and understand quite well what last year felt like for students, for teachers, for our community, with all the different transitions we had to make. We're not quite out of that stage yet, but I'm hoping it won't be as significant as what it felt like last year. And last year, we really prided ourselves on really being anchored around 3 sort of core non-negotiables. Our non-negotiables are safety, that was number 1, around academics, and then around our financial and operational ways we could actually make all of these things happen. So, once we hit really last June of 2020, said, okay, let's kind of ground our work as we navigate this year ahead. We know we're going to face all kinds of challenges. So I wanted to share a little bit of sort of by the numbers of what that meant. So from a technology standpoint, some of you may know or may not realize IPS before the pandemic, we were not a one-to-one district, meaning that not every student had their own personal computer or device that they would leverage for learning. And so between March of 2020 and July of 2020, a process that normally takes districts anywhere from 1 to 2 years, we turned around in 5 months. We became a massive sort of procurer of technology and a massive logistics company, and figured out how to get all of that technology to our students. And it was certainly an all hands on deck approach. So by the numbers, that looked like 28,000 Chromebooks that we distributed to our students in grades 3 through 12, 12,000 Chromebooks that went, iPads that went out to our pre-kindergarten through 2nd grade students. And because a number of our families don't have reliable internet access at home, and that means access that can support multiple devices or the kinds of platforms that we needed to stream, we also had to purchase hotspots, those Wi-Fis, for families to be able to leverage And so over 9,000 of those that were given out and distributed to our families, so that no matter where our students were, they would be able to access learning. So just a massive, massive undertaking in such a short amount of time. And then academically, sort of what was the experience for students and teachers? So first we made 4 transitions across the course of the year. Alan could probably speak to this from a parent standpoint. We started the year virtually. We then came back with our elementary students back in person full time. Our high school students came back in a hybrid model, meaning they were there some days and home some days, and we were able to finally end the year with everyone. By April, we were able to invite everyone who wanted to be in person. But again, you can imagine what that feels like when there's that much change happening when you're in school, you're out of school, some days you're there, and some days you're not, and what it meant for the ability for relationship building, for consistency, for parents to be able to support in any kind of coherent way. There was just a lot of disruption, but all of that in service to hopefully keeping our students and our staff as safe as possible. I'm also really proud, though, that we prioritize in all of that our most vulnerable students. So anytime that we were in a virtual setting, we operated what we call learning hubs for any of our students who were experiencing homelessness, or for our students who had learning disabilities and needed some additional supports that just had to happen in person. We were able to stand those hubs up for those students. So always working hard to keep our eye on those who need us the most in that in-person setting. And then finally, in a year that for our teachers was incredibly tough. I'm talking about you're both teaching the students in front of you and teaching the ones who are on a computer screen. You can't imagine how difficult that is. At this point, we have about 85% of our teachers who are back with us, which is actually right at where we normally are in terms of retention. So we actually did not see, lots of teachers saying, I got to tap out, this is too much, which I think speaks to, one, the commitment of our teachers and how amazing they are as people and how committed they are to our students. But then also speaks to the work that our principals did to make sure schools felt like, even in this really hard time, supportive place for our teachers to be able to do their work and to navigate all the challenges. So I was just in the back on a call to do a weekly call with our principals, again, trying to keep them up to date with everything that's happening so they can, again, be the best supports for our teachers as possible. So I'm really proud of those numbers as well. I'm going to figure this out. And then just COVID safety, and this isn't over yet, you all will know that. We talked about the Delta just a second ago, but again, just to kind of give you a visual of what schools operating in a COVID context means. On our first day of schools last year, 360,000 masks ready for distribution, because God love the kids. They might have the first one on the bus and it's going to be gone by the time they hit the door of school. So having those ready, hand sanitizer like everywhere. That is still the case now. And then our district, even after the federal policy shifted, covered over 3,000 days of our employees who had to quarantine. That was obviously prior to vaccination. There was a lot of time and a lot of disruption that a lot of people experienced in schools. And so I'm hoping that this just helps to paint a little bit of a picture around just all of the challenges and but some of the wins that we had as a district last year in navigating COVID. And then here, to me, are the pictures that really represent the year as well. So these are all from last year, and to me signify the ways that despite the challenges we were facing, our students, our schools, our teachers were still finding these incredibly creative ways to stay connected. So we couldn't go on field trips to the farm, so we bought the farm to the school in one example, so that school students could have that experience. This is a group of students at Simon Youth Academy. They sponsored a blood drive. Their student leadership team did that in the spring because the units of blood that was needed in our community were really dire. And so that was their way to contribute to our community. We ended up hosting March Madness in March, and so we had a group of students who became Indianapolis ambassadors and wrote letters to the players who were coming in town to welcome them to Indianapolis. And then really proud of a program we launched in partnership with IU Health at Christmas Addicts High School, which is a health fellowship for our sophomores who, upon completion of that fellowship, will have guaranteed employment at IU Health and guaranteed tuition support to the post-secondary institution that they choose. And so really incredible things happening despite all the challenges we faced, and sometimes it's the stories that don't always get told about the great things that are happening in Indianapolis Public Schools. And then just a few more examples of the other things that were happening and what we did. So I love this picture of just the classroom. Our classrooms were transformed in different ways, and teachers had to find new ways of doing things, but they built community in really incredible ways. We were able to still operate with athletics happening, giving those opportunities to school. Shortridge High School put on a totally virtual student production in the fall of Clue, which was amazing. So this is the TV in my living room watching the show. I mean, ingenious to be able to figure out how to do that. So well done for our students. And then this is me with a couple of folks on our food service team, because our food service team, you want to talk about incredible people. They never had time off. It didn't matter which way we were learning. They were in our community, making sure that our students were fed, really that any children in the community who needed it were fed. And so that was everything from school sites that were providing meals to being out at libraries, going into apartment complexes, partnering with Gleaners Food Bank to do food distribution and meal boxes for families who had that need. They were just simply incredible during this time and continue to be. So really proud of how our team stepped up in a time that was so incredibly challenging for so many in our community. And even with all of that happening, we also said, okay, we have to do the business of like being a school, right? And the business of what it means to be the biggest district in our city, the biggest district in our state. And so really worked hard on building our strategic plan and getting that sort of stamped to make sure we have a clear direction between now and 2025. So I wanted to share the 4 areas that we're really focused on in our strategic plan. The first is to make sure we're increasing access to rigorous curriculum and instruction. We are a school, it's our school district, a system of schools. It's our job to make sure our kids have access to the very best learning experiences. We are very focused on promoting racial equity. We see disparities play out in the data, and we deeply believe they don't have to exist, and they should not exist, and we should not accept them. And so we're very focused on both promoting racial equity and disrupting racism. We see it playing out in our school and outside of it. Fostering authentic engagements, we're having the opportunities to come alongside community partners, we're asking them to come alongside us. We know that we can't do this work by ourselves, and it takes all of us to do it well. And then finally, how we do that all in a really strategic way and operate and fund. Money doesn't just fall off the trees. We have to use our resources and use them most effectively and efficiently to accomplish the things we want to accomplish. And then we also adopted the values. So if we think about, okay, what we want to do in terms of those priorities, how do we do it? It's through the lens of these 5 core values. Keeping our students first. Racial equity, so that's showing us both a value and a priority. We believe that deeply in that work. Being willing to be continuously improving, so we're not going to get it right every time. How do we take feedback and get better? Operating with integrity, and then operating in community. We believe if we're making our decisions through these lenses, then ultimately our kids are going to be served best and served really well. And so where we are now, so we still got a little bit of a roller coaster. It's not quite as big as the other one. There's still a lot of things we're navigating. Big COVID and the Delta variant is showing up and throwing us in a little bit more of a situation that I think we all thought in the summer we would be in. So there are certainly some challenges, some hills, and some valleys I fully expect that we're going to continue to experience as we navigate this time. But really this time is about recovery and rebuilding. And so that's really what we talked a lot about, and I talked to my team about, is we're recovering from the last year. We know our students faced a lot of trauma. We know we saw things play out and disparities of how things impacted our Black and Brown communities in different ways than others, whether that looks like healthcare access, food access, housing stability. All of those things we saw play out, and all of those things impact our kids and impact the experience they have and bring with them when they show up in our schools every day. But it can't be enough just to recover, because what we also know is true is before the pandemic, there were systems and structures that were not serving our students well, not all of our students. And so then what does it mean to rebuild and rebuild stronger? That's kind of the phrase I'm using a lot, with our community and with our families. How do we dream and see about what we want to be possible in Indianapolis and what we want for our children, and then learn the decisions we make to actually bring that to bear. In some ways, doing things differently than what we had done before, because we've learned some things during this time of the pandemic. And shame on us if we don't take that learning and apply it to the future to build a better reality for our kids. So where we are now, we are, okay, where we are and have gotten ready for the year. We're in the year now, but this is some of what was happening before the year started. Our nursing staff was out doing vaccinations for families who needed them. Our facilities team was doing all kinds of cleaning and organizing, getting our classrooms ready. Our teachers were together planning to welcome our students back, and to this point around the backpack attack work, our family and community engagement team was out hosting drives for families to get the materials that they needed prior to school starting. So there's been a lot of work that happened between the end of the school year in June and starting back up in August to make sure that we were ready to accept and receive our kids. So where we are now is day 14. We are on day 14. Our school buildings are open. Our kids are in their buildings. And these are some of the faces I've seen since I've been out in our buildings these first 14 days, which bring me lots and lots of joy. Our high schools are open. Kids are excited to be there. This is a school they have to figure out how to get the gummy worm in the cup without without using their hands. Fourth grade, I don't know how they did it. They actually were figuring it out. And then another classroom of our pre-kindergartners. So this is their first school experience and getting to figure out just what is school and how do I do this thing called school. And the thing that I will say has been just so evident is our kids' joy in being back together in person, getting to be in the building, getting to do school and connecting with their friends and their teachers. Our team did an incredible job of trying to recreate that in a virtual space, but there's nothing like this in-person experience. And so it's been great to have that, but again, it hasn't come without the challenges that we know so many of our students still experience. And they are incredibly resilient young people, incredibly resilient. They have so much potential in them. It's our job to make sure we're making good on our commitment, our promise to give them the best possible environment, and the best possible chance at doing the things that they want to do in their future. So I'll just end. I went to the Kiwanis site to sort of say, okay, what's the mission of Kiwanis? How does that line up with IPS and how we work together and what we want to do? And ultimately, like, we're all aspiring to the same outcome, the same end goal, which is communities where our kids are loved, they're nurtured, and they can go out and do the things they want to do, and they have all the conditions in place to do that. So we're planting the seeds. We're trying to create the good soils. They can come up and be those vibrant flowers who can grow and thrive. So I'm excited to have Kiwanis as a partner in our city to do that work, to help us create a thriving environment where all of our kids can grow and be the great people that we know they're able to be. So I will stop there and welcome any questions. Sure.
Question. Before you came here, what's your life as a new superintendent? What was something that you were most surprised about, or impressed about? And also, aside from the that you can wave a magic wand and say, I can change one thing that's really going to get, I guess, students to the next level.
Yeah, so what I was most surprised by, which honestly shouldn't have been surprising, but I wasn't inside the organization, is like there are such incredibly talented people in our district. You will not find people who care more deeply, who are more committed to the work than you'll find IPS. I didn't know that to be true. There was a certain narrative that existed that once I was in the organization was so evident and so clear. We have incredible people and incredible team that I'm really thankful for. So I'm happy I get to do this work every day because I'm surrounded by awesome people every day. If I could wave a magic wand, gosh, there are a couple of things. But if I think about the priorities we have and what will make the most difference for our students, I'm really focusing on like our kids getting access to really strong instruction every single day, from day one, right? So some of our students are showing up in pre-kindergarten, there are some skills they don't yet have, and you're kind of playing this kind of catch-up game, and that can all sometimes be used as a crutch to not push and accelerate as much as we need to. And I really think actually coming out of the pandemic, we have an opportunity to say, we can't stay in that paradigm. And how do we continue to just make sure our kids are getting the very best access to instruction every single day? Different ways to get at doing that, but ultimately that would be the one. Yes, sir.
How about facilities? Have you had to close any further schools over the past year?
Not that we are currently operating with students in them, so there are some buildings that don't have students, so like, I think of John Marshall, for example, on the far east side, that's not operating students, and we're hoping to actually have a transaction with a community group to do some work and use that building for a community purpose. Not yet, but we are, looking at our facilities, and I would say I had a study happen with the condition of our facilities. And there are some of our facilities that when I look at what's happening around Indianapolis and some of the buildings getting built and their conditions and how new they are, make me say, like, our kids deserve that too. Our kids absolutely deserve it. And so what do we do again to make that vision come to fruition? Yes, sir.
I see the addressing of the learning loss. I know I think it's going to be difficult to measure because we no longer have iStep, now I learn. And then on top of that, you need technology to all these kids. I'm sure there's some that are really far behind and others. How do you see that unfolding? Address disparities amongst the
Yeah, that's the question we're thinking about all the time and the decisions we're making. I think there's a couple things. One, we know it's not going to be like a one and done, 1 year and everyone's caught back up, but that's not going to be the reality we're facing. So first, it's just coming to grips that this is going to be a longer term effort to do that work. Second, it's been framing for our teachers less around remediate and more around accelerate, which is easy to say, but harder to do. And so that's how our teachers, assessing and seeing where their students are and filling in those gaps where they need to. But you might not need to fill it in for the entire class. You might just need to do it for a smaller group of kids. And so making those decisions about, when do we do it for a whole class versus when do I do it for a small group. To support that effort for our teachers for this year, we built an extended time, but it was extended time for teachers. So we built 10 additional professional development days in our calendar for teacher development and teacher support, where they're engaging in sessions about the English language arts curriculum and where are my kids now, what do I need to do to pivot and adjust and make sure that they're meeting mastery. What we're thinking about, and the theory we're working off of is if we can get those supports to teachers this year, then they'll maximize the time that we have with kids better. But there might still be a need for more time with our students, actually. So looking at the out years, next year, those years out, do we need to actually add time to the day or days to the calendar, just for extended learning? The other thing I anticipate that will actually engage in this school year will be tutoring opportunities for students as well. So again, that can be some more personalized ways that will meet kids where they are and filling those gaps. So that's not in place yet, but probably before we get to second semester. Yes, sir.
Went through IPS kindergarten to junior high school.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that.
And when I was there, it had 100,000 students more than it is today. I'm wondering, is IPS really trying to track back some of the people that get lost to like private schools or townships or out of the county?
Absolutely. It's one of the reasons why we try to have the diversity of offerings that we have. That the thinking is you can find a school that will match what your child's interest or strength is somewhere in our district that can happen. So that's one practical way, it's just those offerings. The other thing, though, to be quite transparent and frank, is really shifting the narrative about IPS. We need cheerleaders who are talking about the awesome things that are happening in our district, because there are so many that are happening all the time. It's very easy for that narrative to turn pretty negative, pretty quickly. And so that's something I'm very focused on is how do I do my job as the chief cheerleader for our district and point out all the incredible people and students who are doing great things. We've got students at Harvard, we've got students at Princeton, you might not guess it, but we do. We've got incredible alums who are leading in our city every single day who came through our district. And so it's getting those stories out more frequently and then making sure the schools and the choices we have available are attractive to families with free lunches. So.
We got time for a couple more questions.
Identity question. How do we do in retention as far as new class? Campus participating versus online option?
For last year or this year?
For this.
For this year?
Yeah.
For this year, there is overwhelmingly families have chosen in person. So I don't have the exact percentage, but I'd say we're over 90% of our families who have chosen to stay at their school and be there in person. Yeah. And I'm hoping that holds as this contact changes some. I'm hoping that holds.
Good question. Are you doing anything about the language barriers for some of them? I've done some little kids in my second grade. We were doing major university. We had a very large population of Burmese children in that class, and I knew I wasn't getting through to them. And I didn't know because sometimes the families are very transient as well, or you might have a huge hotbed of folks from various areas. Are you doing something to help bridge those learning gaps in the language barriers?
Yeah, you know, our English language learning team and just student population has grown over time. It's done nothing but increase, quite frankly. So that team has grown, and that looks like different teachers and staff are going into schools to provide that support. As a district, we're building in more opportunities. So one concrete example at our board meetings, for example, we now have translation devices. So if I'm a parent, I want to just know what's going on. We have those translation devices that parents can have. We have sign language available as well. So we've gotten feedback about just access to what's happening in the district with language barriers, and we're working hard to address those. But for kids specifically, that looks like the English language learning support that they can get at school or in their classroom. And as that population has increased, the number of staff have. We also have a newcomers program that's housed at Northwest Middle School. And so that's for newly arrived families to the United States. If they don't want to go yet to just sort of the traditional school, can choose and opt into the newcomer school, which is literally set up to have those additional supports and services for a family who's trying to navigate a brand new country and culture.
So did you have any mentors growing up or inspiration growing up that made you want to go into education and administration?
I did, my whole family. My mom is a retired elementary school principal. My grandfather, I tell the story, is one of the first Black administrators in Evansville. That's where I'm from, that's Indiana. So he's one of the first principals in the central office administrators in that school system there. My grandmother, maternal grandmother, was a teacher's assistant. My paternal grandmother was my Sunday school teacher. So I think my brother is actually now a teacher. So it's kind of in my blood, I think. It wasn't what I thought I would do initially, but growing up around folks who are in education, seeing the relationships they built with their students, it's a really special thing. I'm also a nerd and I love school. And so I love school when I was little and I actually still love school. I'm super nerdy, so it's a good fit.
And then after the pandemic, what parts of the pandemic teacher-student relationship will be maintained moving forward? I mean, if you have the Wi-Fi's and the Google Chromes and iPads, like, is that funding moving forward to facilitate that?
Great question. Yeah, so we will continue to stay one-to-one. So the technology is in the space, we got to keep it in the space. Our kids need to know those skills anyway, so that will stay in place. We will keep the hotspots as long as we can. I would say, honestly, it would be, I think, advantageous for our community to think of a more sustainable structure than that. So how do we think about internet access? At this point, it's pretty much a utility. I mean, like, we all operate using the internet every day to access applications, to access services. We need the internet. So my push would be yes, we're gonna keep doing that, and also that's probably not the most sustainable or efficient or effective way to ensure that all of our community has access to that service. So that's a challenge, and anybody wants to take that.
Any last questions? Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Children, if you have a school year, always a challenge.
Yes.
So you're in day 14. Now that we have COVID, what's the attendance?
Yeah, so it varies by school. We're probably right now right at that like 85% mark, which isn't good. I will tell you that right now. Some of that is students we are expecting to see and we haven't seen yet. And so there's work that our social workers and others are doing to literally go to homes, knock on doors and say, hey, school's in session. Come on back. Or are you choosing us? Or did you make a different choice? So I expect that's where the rate is right now, just based on who's on the paper that we are expecting and who's showing up. That'll likely shift as we figure out where some of those people who said they were coming but maybe made a different choice or are showing up into school. But that has been a unique challenge for our district, as I talked with other superintendents as well, because you've got, in some cases, students who have not been in school, since March 2020, or who used to go in for 2 days a week and not the other weeks. So that urgency to make sure you're there every day has shifted in some ways. So we're having a lot of conversations around how to, again, rebuild and cultivate that mindset of, no, it's really important for you to be here every single day. We have to see you. But yeah, it is a challenge every year.
Do you think it's affected their mental health by being away from their friends and their, just the day-to-day school expectations?
Yeah, there's not a question about that. I have a student advisory council as well. And one of the things we talked about last spring, the two things they wanted to focus on were racial justice and mental health. And they told lots of stories about their friends of like, I'm just at home all day, I don't get to see anybody. And that was really harmful and really difficult. So we're seeing some of that play out, now they're coming back together and I was like, oh, okay, now we got to figure out how to how do we socialize? How do we be together? How do we build community? How do we do these things? There's a lot of work to do in getting back to that structure. And a lot of kids who we all as grownups, I would imagine, dealing with this has been really tough. And it's been no different for our kids. So that is also. Thank you all so much for having me. It was great to be here. Thank you for all of you.
So Dr. Aleesia, a small donation has been made in your name to 913 Sports.
Yes.
They serve 50,000 kids annually in Indiana area schools through innovative youth cycling program.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thank
They'll
you so
spend this
much.
and promote self-esteem. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we do have a couple of guests today. Gina, if our guests can stand, please, and introduce themselves. I missed this at the beginning of the docket. Please introduce yourself. I appreciate it very much.
I'm Andrea Patton, and I'm actually with Indianapolis Public Schools. I work with all the mental health services. We have mental health in every one of our schools. So, and I'm saying community mental health partner that helps to work with our kids with mental health issues. And I'm also working with all of our social workers to bring programming and to make sure everybody gets everything they need from that.
Hi, my name is Kyoko Okamoto. I came from Japan, and I am a 25 class member of Kiwanis right now. Yes, nice to meet you. Elementary school teacher in Tokyo for a decade. So today's program is very impressive. Thank you so much.
So we will see you back at the Columbia Club next week for Kiwanis Connections. And again, if anybody's free this Saturday, certainly. Alan, please.
My name is Alan Choate, and I'm a law school Kiwanian, but I'm in Kiwanian and another club at the office of the president, so on and so forth. And work with this number for a little while, I'm not going to new club started.
home office thing is keeping me here and not out of town,
Great. Good. Good to hear. That being said, meeting is adjourned.